All right, Daf Tzadi Dalid. This is Sunday's Daf. We're picking it up from the Mishnah at the bottom of Tzadi Gimel Amud Beis. Zok the Mishnah Shalech Adam Yarech Lo'iv Kechavim Shegit Anashe B'Seicha. A person can send a Yarech, which the Gemara understands to be a whole thigh with the Git Anashe inside of it, to a guy. Now, of course, we're not concerned the guy is going to eat it. It's not one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. So the issue here is whether or not if the guy is going to turn around and sell to another Yid, we might be machshel that other Yid to eat a Git Anashe. But the reason we don't have to worry, Zok the Mishnah Memnei Shemekaimai Nicker. It's clear that he did not yet take out the Git Anashe. So since Nikur is Nicker, we don't have to worry about misleading the Yid who would buy it from the guy. All right, so the Gemara's Medayik Shleima in Chatucha Loi. The Mishnah that says Shaleach Adam Yarech Levikachavim, the understanding is that it's a complete and total Yarech, the whole thigh. Machlok is Rashi and Rajba, how the Gemara knows that. Rashi says it's because the word Yarech implies the whole part of the body. Rajba says it's a svara, that's going to be the whole thing. Now, but Mayaskinan, what are we talking about? Is it a location where they did not announce when a treifa was being sold that day? And what the Gemara over here is referring to is back in the good old days where you'd have a town of Rav Yidden and the Sheichtim themselves were the Yiddish Sheichtim. There were some Goyim living in town, so if they would actually mess up a shchita or they had a treifa animal, so the Sheichtim would want to sell it to the Goyim. Now on those days, some cities would have an announcement. Today there was a treifa. Today there is an avela. And because that is in circulation, people would know not to buy from the Goyim. But our Gemara is saying if it's a place where they were not machriz, so you don't know which days there's treifas in the marketplace, then it would be usher to ever buy any meat from Goyim. Because there's no way to know whether or not the Sheichtim have entered a treifa into the system. So for the Gemara moving over to Med Aleph, so chatuchanami l'shader le. So why is it only mutter to send the whole yarech to the Ovid Kechav? You should be able to send even the cut up pieces of the meat that you can't tell whether or not a Git Anashe was removed. Because the halt loy asul mizban minei. Since there's no chashash that Yidden are going to buy from this guy because they don't do hachraza, there's nothing to worry about. So why are we limiting it only to a complete yarech and not even parts of the yarech? El b'makish machrizin. We must be talking about a place where the typical minig was that whenever there was a treifa, they would announce that there's a treifa in the markets. And therefore, it's allowed now for the Yidden to buy meat even from the Goyim on a day that there isn't such an announcement. So in which case, shleimanami le l'shader le, you shouldn't be allowed to even send the guy a whole yarech without first removing the Git Anashe. Why? Because now we're worried the guy himself may cut up the meat, not because he's being evil, but because he's a butcher. So he's a store owner. So his deli shop is going to want to cut up the meat. And therefore, once that happens, the Yid may not know he's buying a Git Anashe. So we need a way to understand the case of our Mishnah, which the Iboyes Ema b'makom shemachrisin, where they do announce, or Iboyes Ema b'makom shemachrisin. But let's explain. Where they do announce. And therefore, on a day when there is no announcement, you would be able to buy from the guy. Still, we're not going to be chayshish. Why? Because it's recognizable when the guy is cutting up the meat. The way he does it is nicker. And therefore, the Yid is going to be more concerned to not buy the cut up meat from the guy because it might have a Git Anashe in it. Or we're talking about a place where they're not machriz, and therefore it's typically usher to ever buy meat from a guy. But this that the Gemara said that why are we limiting it to the complete yarech, that we should also be mater even the cut up meat to the guy. That's not kasha because we're afraid of a chashash that maybe he might give it to another guy in front of another Yid. And then that Yid would assume it's kosher and buy it from him. And seeing that it's cut up, he'll be under the mistaken assumption that the Git Anashe was already taken out. Or or another pshat that the Mishnah is saying that it's usher to set up the cut up pieces to the guy without first taking out the Git Anashe. The reason is because Mishum de Gun of Leila Daite. It's nothing to do with the Isser Git Anashe. It has to do with the Isser of Genevas Das. Because the Yid is misleading the guy. Domar Shmuel usher lignav das abrius, bafil daita shlovi kachavim. The Isser of Genevas Das applies even to Goyim. And what's the Genevas Das here? Because when this guy gets this cut up piece of meat, the guy is thinking, the Yid is such a good guy. He took the time to take out the Git Anashe and give me the best kind of matana that he would even want for himself. And therefore the guy feels a kinship to this Yid, and maybe he's going to be nicer to this Yid, but that's all Genevas Das, because the Git Anashe was never taken out. And since Genevas Das is usher even for a guy, that's the reason why we made the Isser. The Ritzvah over here says that Genevas Das is actually usher min ha-Torah, and you can listen to Rabbi Gross, who discusses the Chakira, whether or not Genevas Das is actual Geneva, like stealing, or we're borrowing the term Genevas Das, but it's really more about the menschlichkeit of the person, and it's not really a Geneva. You're not taking anything from the person. But upon him, it's certainly usher. Now, this idea that we're saying b'shem Shmuel that it's usher lignoi das abriyais v'hod Shmuel la beferish itmar wasn't said beferish, el meklala itmar. We inferred it from Shmuel. The Shmuel have a ka over b'mavra. Shmuel was one time crossing on a ferry. Omar leila shame. He told his attendant over there, pasye lemabure. Go pay the ferry driver. So pasye, so he paid. V'ikbed, and the Shmuel got upset. Now, what happened over here? That he should get upset. Didn't he just do what he was told? So my time ikbed, because I'm Rabbiya. Tarnagil is treifa havoy. It was a treifa tarnagil that he gave the ferry captain. V'yovin yele b'mar deshchutin. He gave it to him under the pretense of it seeming that it was kosher and geshachten. But Mara over here, Rashi says a lotion of Tamura, like he swapped it. So he basically tricked him. He pulled the wool over his eyes. Rava Omar, Anpika Omar Leila Ashkuye. Shmuel told his Masharis to give him from the Anpik to drink, which is some kind of a keli that would hold a certain amount of wine. But Ashkuye Chamra Megiza. And the attendant gave the ferry driver like cheaper diluted wine, even though typically that kind of keli would hold more chush of a wine. So what do you see? So you see, for the fact that Shmuel was makbid, must be he's makbid on Genevas Das. Now, who cares that we only know this through inference and not that Shmuel said it beferish? So, and for the Gemara, the reason why it's important for us to know that it was mechlola, because really you could reinterpret these stories differently and say it's not because of the Genevas Das. Because Lamanda Amar Treifa Havi, according to the one who said that Shmuel got upset when the Tarnagels was a treifa, so Amar Le, one could say that Amai Tisha Isura, that Shmuel was upset by his shamish, that why you even have a treifa chicken in your possession. If a person has a treifa, they gotta get rid of it. It's only a takala for them to hold on to it. So that maybe was why he was upset. And and according to the one who said that Shmuel gave his attendant to drink the anpik, so anpika chaya mashma. Shmuel's just upset for not listening to what he said, because he said give the guy the anpik, which implies give him the good kind of wine and not the shvacha wine. So just by not listening to his instructions, the reason he got upset. Now we're going to get more into the halachas of Genevas Das. Tanya, Rabbi Meir Omer al Yisarev Adam lechaver lisodetzle. A person should not try to invite somebody to come for a suda via dea b'she'eno sayed. It's like you know that the Schwartzes are taken for a suda, and you say, "Oh, can you come for a suda? Oh, you guys are already taken. Oh, what a bummer! I really wanted to have you over, but you knew you could never really invite them." That's classic Genevas Das. Also, v'lo yarba loy b'tikrevis. Don't give gifts via dea where you know you can't accept them. Like, oh, I didn't know you were makbar nechol of Yisrael, so I guess you can't have this Hershey bar. No, come on, you knew that. And don't open up for him barrels that already were sold to somebody else to make it look like you're willing to give it to him, unless you tell him beforehand that they're already sold goods. Or don't say you should anoint yourself with oil when you're actually offering him an empty keli. But if all this is done for his kavod, meaning the actual offering gives kavod to the person, even though you don't really have an intention to follow through, or it could be for the onlookers that they need to see that person being receiving kavod, that would be a reason to be mater. And Pasuk and Rabbi Yehuda opened them up barrels that were sold already. So l'chayra, you see that it is mutter to do that. It's not Genevas Das. And for the Gemara, oduye, odei. Rabbi Yehuda already was meidia ula that they were sold. So there's no Genevas Das. Or v'yiboysim ashani ula de chaviv leila Rav Yehuda. Maybe ula was so chaviv to Rav Yehuda, the belav hachinami patuche miftach. He was going to be doing this anyway. He was going to be opening this, even if they weren't already sold. He was going to open up the barrels for him. Tana Rabbana, we learned in a brisa, lo yelech adam lebeis avil ubiyadai login hamiskashkesh. Don't go to the beis avil where the typical minute was to bring wine, but don't bring a half-empty flask that's splashing around, because it sounds like you're already giving them when there's really much less to give them. Don't fill up with water, because it'll also fool people. Because it's going to fool the people to thinking there's wine in there. But if let's say there's a lot of people there from town, and therefore it will give more nichum to the ovel, because it looks like you're giving the ovel more kavod, then it's moni mutter. Tana Rabban in the Brisa says, don't sell somebody a sandal, this kind of shoe, made from the leather of an animal that dropped dead, under that mistaken pretense that this was a geschachtene animal. Now, what's the difference how the animal died? You're taking leather from the animal, irrespective of how it died. No, one is because there's a Genevas Das, and the understanding is that if the leather that comes from a healthy animal that was geschachten is going to be better quality leather than if it died because it was sick and old. And the other reason is that why did this animal drop dead? Well, maybe because it got bitten by a snake and there's poison in there, and then the leather is going to have poison in it, and a person wearing those shoes could actually get somehow injured. Don't send somebody a barrel of wine when there's some oil floating on top, because the oil is very valuable and people are going to think it's a barrel full of oil. And now we'll tell you a terrible story that will illustrate how bad this could be. Because there was this oil on top, and he said, "Oh wow, now I got a whole barrel full of oil." And he brought these guests to have the oil because he thought he had so much oil. The guests came in, and he found that, oh no, this is only full of wine and not oil. And this was devastating to the point. He committed suicide. And then the next part of the Brisa says, the guests who have food in front of them, and when they're invited, they can't give it. Don't give it to the kids of the homeowner. not rishus mi balabais, unless there is rishus from the balabais to give it to the children. Now we're talking about a case of when there's anius and there's no other food in the house. If you got a big chicken dinner and you want to give one little piece of schnitzel to one of the kids in the house, that's not going to be the issue. We're talking about when there's not enough to go around. And now we have another tragic story. Somebody invited 3 guests during a famine year, so there's very little food. He didn't have enough to give these guests other than 3 eggs. Now the son of the host came, and one of the guests took his egg and gave it to the kid. Oh, look at this cute little kid, I'll give him an egg. And so did the second and third guests do the same thing. So now the father shows up and sees that the kid's got 1 egg in his mouth, and the 2 eggs are in his hands. The father thinks, what a chutzpah, my kid over here took the guest's eggs. So he hit him down to the ground, and the kid died. When the mother saw that the father just killed the kid by accident, also she committed suicide by jumping off the roof, and the father now, who just lost his wife and son, also killed himself. So Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, al-davar zeh nehargu sholosh nefashos miYisrael. Based on this, 3 people died, which is obviously terrible. So Ma'iko mashmalan. So what's the whole point of telling us this member from Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov? So the Gemara, the cooler Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, to know that the whole brisa, meaning even the stuff that was written beforehand, was all under the memra of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Okay, back to our Mishnah. Tana Rabbanan hashalech yarech lechaver. If someone sends a thigh of an animal to his fellow yid, shlema, if it's whole, you don't got to take it out, because it's clear that Gidanasha wasn't taken out. As we said, the lack of nikur is nikur, trying to get my money's worth out of that alliteration. But chatucha, if it's cut up, then sarach litel heimena Gidanasha. Then first you got to take the Gidanasha out of it before you give it to your Yiddish friend. But let's say you're sending this thigh to a goy, bein chatucha, bein shlema, in a sarach litel heimena Gidanasha. You do not need to remove the Gidanasha. Why? It's for 2 reasons. You're not allowed to sell nevelos and trefas to a guy unless you first tell him that it's a nevel or a trefa. And that's either because of the following reasons. Because you can't fool him, because he's under the impression he's buying kosher flesh. And the other issue is going to be we're afraid that the guy's going to turn around and sell to another yid. And a yid should not say to the guy, go and buy meat for me with this dinar, because of 2 different reasons, turning over to base. One is echem anasin. We don't want the guy shaking him down. The guy now has your dinner, and he can turn around and now demand things from the yid because he's got his money. The other reason is because maybe they're going to sell to the guy nevelos and trefas and bring that back to the yid. So you can't send the guy to buy your meat for you. Omar Mar, Uba'ovid Kechavim, in a case of when someone sends a yarech to a guy, ben shlema ben chatucha, eino tzarech litel himena gidanasha, you don't need to remove the gidanasha. So am I asking, what are we talking about? Reason we're talking about where they do announce usually when there's a treifa. And today there was no announcement, therefore it should be mutter to buy from the guy. So chatucha mayin tzarech litel himena gidanasha. Why, when you send the guy the cut up yarech, you don't have to first take out the gidanasha? Kivin le'achar, since it was no announcement, asi lemizban minei, now a yid might buy from the guy, and therefore there might be a real takala. El Pshita, we must be talking about Makom She'ein Mach reason. The Bryce is talking about where they do not normally announce it, and therefore it's usher to buy meat from a guy, and therefore there should be no concern that the yid is going to turn around and buy it from the guy and eat a gidanasha. Now the middle case of the Bryce, Ema Mitziyasa. What about the middle part, which says Mipnei Shnei Dvarim Amru? For 2 reasons the Chazal said Ein Meicher Nevelos Trefus Levid Kachavim Echem Nei Shemateu, because you're fooling him. V'Echem Shema Yachzer V'Yim Keren Li Yisrael Acher. Now V'Ima Makom Shemach reason, if you're telling me the Bryce is talking about a place where they're not machers, and therefore it's always usher to buy meat from a guy, why are we worried that he might resell the nevelos and trefas to a yid? A yid is not going to buy nevelos and trefas from the guy. Must be now we're talking about that. They do make an announcement whenever there was a nevelo or a trefa. But Ema Seifel, look at the last case of the Bryce. Don't tell the guy that kachli bediner zebasar, go buy meat for me, because he's going to be extorted. Now, if we're talking about where they do announce it, why is there any kind of concern that they might sell this guy the nevelos and trefas? If there was a treifa to buy, they would have made such an announcement. So what is going on with this long brisa? You can tell me the Reisha and the Sefer are talking about cases where they're not machers, but the middle cases when they are machers, that's a very strange structure of a brisa. That is exactly how we should understand the brisa. Reisha of the Sefer b'makom she'ein machrizin, but mitziyasa, the middle case is b'makom she'machrizin. But Rav Amar, no, kula b'makom she'machrizin. The whole brisa is talking about where they are machers. Reisha of the Sefer she'achrizai, but mitziyasa shaleachrizu. For whatever reason, they didn't announce it. And since they didn't announce it, people are going to mistakenly just assume that all the meat's going to be kosher. But Rav Ashi Amar, kula b'makom she'machrizin, the whole brisa is talking about where they don't make the announcement. So mitziyasa, and the reason why the mitziyasa Yitziyasa asers selling the not kosher meat to the guys because Gzeir Shem Yim Karena Bifnei Yisrael in front of another yid who will then turn around and assume it's kosher and buy the meat from him. Okay, now Hechi Machrizim, when we're talking about this hachraza, what did they actually announce? Omer Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Nafal Bisr L'Bnei Chayla. There's meat for the Bnei Chayla, which could be the soldiers or the general populace, but there's meat. We don't say what kind of meat. Nafal Trei Fasel L'Bnei Chayla. Let's be more specific. The treifa meat fell into the marketplace here. No, the answer is because no one's going to want to buy it. Le'zavne. People don't want to buy treifa meat. That doesn't sound good. Well, but you're fooling them because they're assuming that it's kosher. And for the Gemara, inuhu dekamato nafshayu. They are fooling themselves. All we said was there's meat. We didn't say what kind of meat, and therefore it's not the responsibility to explicate what kind of meat it is. Kihad de marzutra bereder of Nachman. Like this is illustrated by the story that Avikazel me sichra lebei mechuza. He was going from this place of sichra to Bei Mechuza v'Rav Safra Avikazu l'sichra, and Rav and Rav Safra were coming to sichra. Pogo adadi. They bumped into each other on the road. Who savar lape who dekasum. So Marzutra thought they were coming to greet him, and they were coming out covered. Amar lahu lama lahu l'Rabbanu l'Trayach v'asu kulei hai. Why are you being matriach yourself to come so far? Amar le Rav Safra. Rav Safra, who was known throughout Shas as someone who was very honest. He's the one who was davening, and the guy was making offers. I think that's the Gemara in Makis. Anyway, Rav Safra said, "Anan le havi adinan dekasimar." We did not know that you were coming, and havi adinan tvei havi tarchinan. Had we known, we would have been matriach ourselves even more. But Amar le Rava says, "My time Amar le hachi dachash daach l'shise ledaite." What's the reason you're saying that and making him feel bad? Don't you think it would be better to give him the impression that you came special for him? Amar le v'hakamatinan lu. No, because that would be Genevis das. So ihu dekamati nafshi. But Zok Rava, it's not true. He could have misled himself. Let him just assume this. You're not mechuyev to correct his mistake, and therefore the same way, the guy is not being fooled by you, but rather he only has himself to blame because he didn't clarify what kind of meat it was. We'll stop here and pick it up with a utabcha for tomorrow's daf.